My second year in command, I was irrelevant. I worked maybe 3 or 4 hours a day.
Welcome to On Your Lead, the show about the miles that make you better at life, leadership, and everything in between. I'm Thad David, a Marine Recon Scout Sniper veteran, speaker, and endurance athlete. Let's get into it. I'm here today with Mike Abrashoff, author of It's Your Ship. How are you doing, Mike?
Doing great, Thad. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you could, just give us a little bit of a background for everybody that doesn't know about your amazing career. Would you mind sharing a little bit?
Well, I'm kind of an accident. Went to the Naval Academy and came up through the ranks and had the fortune or misfortune of getting assigned one of the worst ships in the Navy. And I couldn't choose our missions when I took command, and I couldn't choose the people I work with. And yet here we are near the bottom in performance, and I'm thinking, gee, this is it. It's the end of my career. How do I improve this ship? Well, then it hit me. Why not engage the crew and get them to feel like they're part of the organization? And so I embarked on something that had never been done before in the history of the Navy. I interviewed every sailor individually, all 310 of them. And I told them, I don't care what your age is. I don't care what your rank is. I don't care how long you've been here. You can come to work every day and challenge every aspect of our operation. And if you have an idea how to improve a process 1%, I want to hear from you. And what happened? The crew started taking ownership, and they drove performance, and we became the leader in the Navy.
That's such an incredible story and journey. And I feel like just even saying I'm going to interview that many individuals, I think a lot of leaders and a lot of people in general might just think back and say, well, that would take a lot of time. Like how much time, just out of curiosity, how much time did that take?
Some interviews took 5 minutes. Others took 45 minutes. It all depended on what came up during the conversation. They were free flowing, and sometimes they would veer, off on paths or tangents that I never anticipated. But what it enabled me to do was to find out where people were coming from. And some, didn't want to share anything. So, I just asked them what their goals were and how I could help them accomplish their goals. But the other ones, it was like, gee, these people were smart. Maybe I can help them chart a course for their lives and their careers so that when they leave the Navy, they'll be, they'll be in a good position to climb the ladder of success. And so the interviews, I would do 3 or 4 a day. And what resulted in I put a lot of effort in the first year, but once the crew were connected to our purpose and they knew what needed to be done, my second year in command, I was irrelevant. I worked maybe 3 or 4 hours a day. And so you put the work in up front, and then it gives you time on the back end to prepare the ship to do even greater things in the future.
And I love that principle because that's essentially the goal of a leader, is to empower your people so that they can take the reins and you can step back. But to your point, it's that work on the front end that makes it all possible.
Absolutely. And the big thing was connecting people to our purpose. And once they understood what was important, then we didn't allow ourselves to become distracted by stuff that wasn't important. So it was a relentless focus on the important things. And then once people understood my vision, that we're playing to win, we're not playing to come in number 2, then everything we did was built on getting us to that next level. And once we got there, they took the reins. And then it was my job to figure out how to keep us there and to get even better. And so after that first year, we got awarded the Spokane Trophy, which is the award for the best ship in the Pacific Fleet. But then I spent my second year figuring out how we can do even better. And in years 2 and 3 after I left the ship, Benfold won the award for best ship in the entire U.S. Navy. And it was because I didn't get bogged down in $5 an hour work. And it freed me up to do the big thinking, how to position ourselves for the future.
Interesting. And so when you say getting bogged down in $5 an hour work, I think that's something that a lot of leaders can learn from. What sort of things do you see leaders getting bogged down in, just in general, for $5 an hour work when you say that versus looking at the big picture stuff?
So what I see is people doing what they're comfortable with. And like if they were a technician starting out, they become the super technician. Where I really see this is in sales. That a person who was a great salesperson becomes the head of sales, and then they become the super salesperson, and that no deal can close unless they're involved in it. So they're having to get involved in every deal instead of focusing on how to bring in future deals. Let your sales force execute on the deals. You focus on bringing in future deals.
I love that. There's a article I read a while back, and it was a kind of an old Xeroxed. That's how you know how old this thing was, a Xeroxed piece of paper. But just said how your best salesperson is going to make your worst manager, most likely. And I would imagine it's from that principle. I'm going to steal that super salesperson that just all deals must go through this one individual.
So I'm not here to badmouth my predecessor, but my predecessor was a nuclear trained engineer and probably the smartest nuclear trained engineer the Navy ever produced.
Mm-hmm.
And yet when he took command of the ship, instead of becoming the captain of the ship, he became the super chief engineer and had to do everything himself in the engineering department. And as a result, people stood back and said, okay, you do it. Nobody took ownership. Nobody took responsibility. And USS Benfold became the first new construction ship in the history of the Navy to flunk their first engineering certification. And that's with one of the smartest nuclear trained engineers we ever produced. So the lesson that taught me was, you get promoted and then you tend to focus on what brought you there. That's not why you're getting promoted. It's to get the organization to that next destination.
And that's that thinking bigger, not thinking what is easy for me to do, what do I like to do, but what is the big picture, doing what only you can do.
Exactly.
It's beautiful. Thank you, Mike. I absolutely really enjoy that just pathway, because I think so many people can learn a lesson inside of that. So as you think about your ship and what you're able to do, and I don't know if I can plug your book enough, because I really truly think any leader needs to read it. It's such a great book about empowering your team and the people that you're meant to lead. You mentioned something earlier about seeing your purpose. That is, once they saw your purpose, they were able to align and get behind it. And I'm wondering, what did that conversation look like with getting people in line? Like, what was your purpose on the ship? And how did you go about that? Because I'm thinking about me in the Navy. I was in the Marines, but being on a Navy ship, it was really daunting when you see higher ranking individuals. You kind of stiffen up a little bit. And, what I'm imagining what this conversation would have been like had you said, hey, this is, what do you want to get off this ship? And I would have probably said something about, at the time, 21 years old, 22 years old, let's play more video games type of thing. What would you have said is your purpose, and how do you get people aligned with it?
So our purpose was keeping our fellow citizens safe.
Okay.
And everything we did from, practicing launching Tomahawk cruise missiles down to shining a brass fire station was contributing to that mission. And what you bring up the story about being afraid to talk to senior officers. To me, my crew were my VIPs. And when admirals and generals and ambassadors came on board our ship, I had junior enlisted E3s take the 4 and 3 stars around the ship and give them a tour. And one of them was Marine Corps 4-star General Anthony Zinni, who had command of the Central Command. And he came on board with the 3-star fleet commander and with the U.S. ambassador to Bahrain. And I had a E3, his name was Michael Cotton, who had just achieved a certification. And Zinni comes on board, and I said, General, welcome aboard the best damn ship in the Navy. Fireman Cotton is going to give you a tour around the ship. And you should just see his eyes like bulge out. He looked at the Admiral Fargo, who was the fleet commander, and he went like this. And so Fireman Cotton gave General Zinni the tour of his life. And Zinni was in Bahrain for the Marine Corps birthday ball. And he ripped up his speech, and all he talked about was leadership on USS Benfold and getting this tour from Fireman Cotton. So I wanted my crew to respect the chain of command. I didn't want them to fear us. And by putting them out in front when dignitaries came, they were very comfortable around VIPs.
I would imagine so. Well, because you give them the power to take control of that situation. And I would imagine there was some teaching and some support there of what that looks like to walk a 4-star around the ship. But it's a big honor. I mean, I would imagine they bragged about it. I bet they bragged about it still to this day.
Absolutely. And most commanders use that time as schmooze time to ingratiate themselves with the chain of command. The way I'm going to ingratiate myself with the chain of command is by putting my people first. And Zinni was smart enough to figure that out, and that he had never seen it before, but he liked the style.
Yeah, it just hit me, and this is kind of a older memory for me, but just being overseas in Iraq. I did the initial invasion of Iraq back in 2003, and went back again 2004, 2005. And I remember specifically different instances where we would be doing what our team needed to do, and then you would watch some officers kind of step in and kind of take over, and to that assert themselves in that, to use your example earlier, that super salesperson, where if there's a call for fire mission that we were more than capable of doing, it was almost, it created this bad blood, because the officer would come in, take over, do the thing, and kind of get the credit for it. And that's how we felt like, oh, they just want to get the credit for doing that. But it really stepped out on our toes, and I could see just real time for us how that was impacted us in a negative light and created just not a good relationship between officers and enlisted. Where do you see, what's that?
On Benfold, the crew were the VIPs.
Yeah,
and
it's amazing. Where do you see a lot of leaders? I know you speak to just tons of organizations, tons of different industries. Where would you say a common thread is of why leaders tend to struggle, if they are struggling with it? Like, why is that? And what advice would you give to them?
Well, I honestly think that people in business today are overtasked and overworked and probably under-resourced. Everybody's doing more with less. So it's not like people wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to be a bad boss. They're under a tremendous amount of pressure. And so, but the challenge is, okay, how do you succeed while maintaining a decent quality of life for yourself so that you can go home at night happy? And so to me, the only way to do that is to develop your people and train them to take burdens off your shoulders. And so I realized I don't have to do everything myself. Train people, delegate the lesser important responsibilities. I had a line in the sand on the ship. If what you're doing could kill somebody, injure somebody, waste taxpayer money, or do damage to the ship, don't go there without me. But if what you're doing would run short of my line in the sand, man, I hope you're perfect. But you know what? I'm not perfect, and I'll never do it perfectly. As long as you can do 90% of it and I don't have to get involved, I'll take that all day long. And so the key is to keep your focused on what the important things are and find somebody to do the things that have to get done, but don't necessarily require your level of intervention.
That makes a ton of sense. And it just hit because I know this tends to be a dividing line. You might as well just open up the political box here with when to set up a Christmas tree or not. And so given that this is a couple days before Thanksgiving, half of the listeners are going to think, oh no, he's that person. And I like to set up Christmas early, but we did actually put ornaments on the tree last night. And it was a beautiful thing watching my wife let the kids, we have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, they just wanted to put ornaments on the tree. And they put up probably 95% of the ornaments. And it just got done really quickly. Whereas in my mind, I was thinking, oh, where could we put it? What do we need to do? Where does each one need to go? But the fact is, it got done really quickly, and maybe we readjusted one or two, but they had a blast doing it, and it just got completed so fast. And I know that kind of a strange example, but I'm thinking about, doing something on the ship, to your point, man. If you're getting it done 90% and I didn't have to touch it, that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I love that example of it, and just empowering and developing your people to be able to do those things. So that's what a great, great piece of advice. So as you think about developing just people in general, you give so many good principles in your book and good examples of where you empowered your people. And I firmly believe that there's some baseline stuff that kind of a foundational level, if you will, that are more important than others. I say more important loosely, just that some stuff builds off of other items. What would you say are some basic principles that you would put as foundational things first, that we would build upon as it relates to leadership and just empowering your people? Where would you start with that?
Well, you have to be technically competent at whatever it is that you're doing.
Okay.
So people need to have confidence that you've got the experience and the wisdom to get you where you need to go. And
Okay.
the way you do that, we don't go out and hire admirals and generals off the street. You've got to work your way up and take on increasingly complex positions as you climb the ladder. And so, but you would never get that if you weren't competent at that entry level. So technical competence is first and foremost. And then it's being able to lead greater numbers of people and greater complexity of systems. And also influence outside your immediate sphere. And so it's not enough just to get your job done. If you can influence outside your area and get them to work and collaborate better as a team, then that's more foundational building blocks. It's about influencing others and influencing customers. The most important thing is you want to make your customers look good to their chain of command as well. And so everybody is under pressure today. In your organization, in your customers' organizations, they're under pressure. Make them look good. And, that's how you develop your professional reputation. I worked for a 2-star one time, and he said, Mike, the most important thing is your professional reputation. He said, don't ever squander it. Don't ever take it for granted. That will be the thing that gets you your next assignment. And so be thinking about what your reputation is, and is it something that people want to be a part of and work with, or is it something less? And your professional reputation leads to trust. People will trust that you will deliver excellence for them. And so those are the foundations upon which you build everything else.
I could see that, just as you mentioned, reputation, that just kind of put that all together, overlapped with kind of what we were talking about earlier with empowering your people. And just what I shared of interacting with officers that kind of take control of things versus, to your point, giving control. What an amazing reputation in those spheres of influence, kind of, outside of your sphere, as you get down to other individuals, let's say on the ship, for instance, that reputation builds really rapidly. So I could see how those overlap inside of that.
And I found that the more control I gave up, the greater command over the ship that I gained.
Tell us some more about that.
So if I gave up control, and delegate, and people started enjoying success at a higher level for them, then they become more loyal and dedicated and committed, and they tend to follow you more and believe when you say this is where we need to go. And so when people trust you and they feel empowered, they become more engaged, and they tend to obey the direction that you're setting for the organization. as opposed to, complaining about it or not supporting it or slow walking it. They buy into it. And so what you want to do is to get people to buy into your vision. And to me, that's like Dan Campbell of the Detroit Lions. I mean,
Okay.
to me, he's an inspirational leader that people want to buy into. And you can see the enthusiasm and you can see the dedication of his team. So to me, he's one of the best leaders in the NFL today.
That's just an incredible way to look at it too. And I love that just giving up more control gives you more command. And what a powerful thing. I don't know that I recall hearing that, but I absolutely love it. Give up more control, get more command. And yeah, I'm still mentally just processing that because it's a really powerful thing and really just empowering your people to take control. And I could see that where they're going to have success. They're going to get credit, to your point, be VIPs. They're going to come to you for hey, Mike, can I have some more of that? And, it seems like the next bit of that evolution is they're going to come to you for more of it, which becomes more command that you get.
So, one of the things that the crew did complain about was, we're in the Persian Gulf, busting our butts for 5 months, 6 hours on, 6 hours off, and people get tired, and then it's time to leave the Gulf and head home to San Diego. But we were going via Australia, and on the first day after we left the Persian Gulf, I gave everybody the day off. But on day 2 is when we started preparing for the next deployment that we would see a year away. And the crew was complaining about it, that they didn't get any time to decompress in starting to prepare for the next deployment. And I kept telling them, this is about controlling our own schedule. If we drive the training, then the Navy isn't going to force it down our throat. So there was whining and complaining about working hard even after we left the Persian Gulf. But prior to going on our next deployment, you have to go through a 6-month certification process. And most of the 6 months is spent at sea. And at week 1, the Navy sends the assessors on board. And we have 24 mission areas that we have to get certified for before we can go on our next deployment. So at week 1, the Navy assesses your baseline level of performance, and then they figure out how to tailor the training for the next 6 months. And at week 1, I asked to take the final graduation problem that we would see 6 months down the road. And everybody thought I was nuts. The assessors came on board hell-bent on making sure that we failed. But at week 1, we passed all 24 milestones, which had never even been attempted. Nobody ever even thought about it. So my admiral was deployed, and so I called the 3-star, and I said, "Hey, we just validated, the 6 months at sea." He said, "No, you didn't. Nobody's ever done it before. We're not set up to allow you to do it. You got to do the 6 months anyway." And I said, "Think about this, Admiral. It gives us no incentive to keep our readiness at a high level. You got to give us an incentive to stay, keep our performance at a high level." And he said, "How about 3 months at sea?" I said, "How about 2 months?" He said, "Fine, just don't call me again." So over the next 2 months, we visited Puerto Vallarta, Cabo San Lucas, San Francisco, and Vancouver. And nobody could figure out why Benfold had the highest morale of any ship in the Navy. And the crew finally got it. We are in control of our own schedule. And it goes back to, taking one day off, but then preparing for the future and raising the bar, training those next levels of leaders who are going to take the ship on the next deployment. So it's about always prepping for the future and building that bench strength so that when senior people transfer, you've got somebody already trained to step in. And as a result, the crew found out what it was like to control your own schedule. And the Navy leaves us alone. We do what we want.
That, at a foundational level, makes me think of just controlling the controllables. But you said it earlier too, just control your schedule so that nobody else tells you what to do with your times. Because if you don't take control of your schedule, somebody else is going to.
Exactly.
And what a great example of doing the work on the front end. And then we had a really good time. Or you guys had I would imagine those were not horrible stops. There was not a lot of complaints at that point in time.
They were all, we were the envy of the Pacific Fleet.
I bet you were. People wanted that to be longer than 2 months, I'm sure. Well, we don't have to go back just yet, Mike.
Right.
Wow. I really enjoy that. Just take control of your schedule so that somebody else doesn't. And man, powerful stuff. So as you build on that foundational piece right there, so knowing your task technically was one of the ones that you mentioned, which I can see if you understand that, that's going to make it easier to do that thing that you can do. Because as you shared it a little bit earlier of knowing what your job is on a base level, because if you don't, if a leader steps into a role, doesn't understand it, I'm going to be more inclined to go back to, again, using that sales example that you mentioned. If sales is my favorite thing to do and I'm now a manager, but I don't understand what a manager is supposed to do, of course I'm going to lean in and become super salesperson or super insert whatever that role is versus knowing the job there and then working on your sphere of influence and what your reputation is. What else would you stack on top of that as far as low-hanging fruit for leadership?
So, as I told you, we have to work our way up to get selected for commanding officer. And my first department head tour, I was not as technically competent as I should have been. And it was probably laziness on my part. And we're at sea. I was one of the 3 department heads standing shift work, running the ship at sea. And it was 6 hours on, 12 hours off. And I was not prepared to run a watch team on this level of complexity of ship. And I was flailing the first 2 or 3 days, just trying to get through my 6 hours. And then finally, the commanding officer brought me into his cabin and said, Mike, it's not enough for you to get through your 6 hours. He said, you need to spend your 6 hours preparing for the next guy to do his 6 hours. And if he spends his 6 hours preparing for the guy after that, then all you do is show up and prepare for the next watch because your watch has already been taken care of. So it's something that I've thought about a lot, is it's not enough to do your job. You need to prepare for the next person coming behind you. And so I've often thought that a commanding officer's final fitness report should not be the day you leave, but should be 6 months or 12 months down the road. Did you leave the organization in a way that is self-sustaining, or does it fall apart the minute you leave? And I've seen ships fall apart the minute a commanding officer leaves because it was being held together by the willpower of one person, and that's not sustainable for the long term. So you spend your watch preparing for the next watch so that the person who relieves you doesn't have to lift a finger. And so that's why it was important for me that Benfold won the award for best ship in the entire Navy years 2 and 3 after I left, because that showed that, to me, that I was focused on the right thing, the long-term health, instead of just short-term performance gains.
Right. It wasn't about you. It was about putting the ship in control of its own destiny.
Exactly.
Which, in the end, and I think that's the irony of it, and the beautiful piece of it is that giving up that control, so to speak, you still are this amazing leader in so many people's eyes. You know, I've met people from your ships, and everybody looks up to you and puts you in such high regard that you don't lose leadership by giving up control. You actually gain it, which is a beautiful thing.
Yep, absolutely.
Mike, thank you so much for taking some time and just being here to chat with us about it. I'd love to ask you one final question as we step out of here and just close this up. As you think about it, I think hindsight is kind of the biggest teacher, and you wrote about it in your second book. It's Our Ship, kind of changing the verbiage a little bit, which I also would recommend people go check out. What are some things that you look back on in your career, just in the Navy, your career speaking? What are some lessons that you've learned, or one big lesson you've learned that in hindsight you wish you would have done differently, or you look at just through a different light?
Well, that's a great question. For the Navy, it would have been to collaborate more with my fellow ship captains. And it wasn't until after I got out that I realized that Benfold was one ship of a 10-ship aircraft carrier battle group. And in 2 years, I didn't do one thing to help a fellow ship or help a fellow ship captain. And it hit me, if the aircraft carrier had gotten sunk because one of the other ships didn't do their job, it would not have mattered that we were the best. So it would have been to take a more global view of things and realize that, you may be the best in your little wicket, but if the rest of the fleet is sinking, life is going to be tough. Yep. So it would be to have a bigger view and see how you can support other functions within the organization so that you all work together better as a team to be a better overall organization instead of just an individual unit.
That's really, really powerful stuff. And I think internally, just as you look at it, you saw what you could do on your ship or y'all's ship that you took control of, and just looking at the power and what you could have changed more globally. So, Mike, always incredible to sit down. I really enjoy anytime I get to listen to you talk or just have a conversation with you. I really appreciate you and taking some time today.
My honor. Happy to be here.
Progress doesn't happen all at once. It only happens 1 mile at a time. If this show resonated with you, pass it along. And until next time, take the shot.